It all started with a chain, a simple, innocuous chain stretched across my driveway. I never thought it would lead to a full-blown war with the homeowner association and their self-appointed enforcer, Karen. But here we are. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and privacy is a luxury. My house is at the end of a cul-de-sac, and for years I've dealt with people using my driveway as a parking spot. Delivery trucks, visitors, even random strangers. They all thought it was okay to block my access. At first I let it slide, but after the third time I couldn't get to work because some idiot parked in front of my garage. I'd had enough. So I installed a chain. Just a basic, retractable chain with a sign that said, "Private driveway, no parking." It wasn't fancy, but it got the job done. Or so I thought. The first day it was up, Karen showed up at my door. Karen is the kind of neighbor who thinks she runs the neighborhood. She's always poking her nose into everyone's business, reporting every little infraction to the homeowner association. She's the reason Mr. Thompson got fined for having his trash cans out an hour too long. She's the reason Mrs. Garcia had to repaint her front door because it was too bright. "Alec," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern, "that chain is a safety hazard. What if someone trips over it? What if a child gets hurt?" I tried to explain that it was my property and I had every right to protect it. But Karen wasn't having it. She stormed off, muttering something about rules and community standards. The next day, the police showed up. I was in the middle of making breakfast when I heard the knock on the door. Two officers stood there looking serious. "We received a complaint about a safety hazard on your property," one of them said. I couldn't believe it. Karen had actually called the cops over a chain. I showed them the driveway, explained the situation, and they seemed to understand. They even agreed that it was a reasonable solution to a real problem. But before they left, one of them said, "Just be careful. Some people take these things personally." Oh, I knew who took it personally. The next day I got a letter from the homeowner association. A fine, $500 for unauthorized modifications to common property. I laughed at first. Common property? My driveway? But then I read the rest of the letter. If I didn't remove the chain within 48 hours, the fine would double. And if I didn't pay, they'd put a lien on my house. I was furious. I called the homeowner association office, but they just repeated the same nonsense about community standards and safety concerns. When I asked to speak to someone higher up, they hung up on me. That's when I decided to fight back. I started by researching the homeowner association bylaws. Turns out there's a clause that says homeowners can make reasonable modifications to their property as long as it doesn't affect the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood. My chain was hardly an eyesore, and it certainly didn't violate any safety codes. I wrote a formal appeal, citing the bylaws, and sent it to the homeowner association board. A week later, I got another letter. My appeal had been denied. The fine was now $1,000. I was livid, but I wasn't going to give up. I started talking to my neighbors, hoping to find some support. Most of them were sympathetic, but too scared to speak up. They all had stories about Karen and the homeowner association. Fines for ridiculous things, arbitrary rules, constant harassment. But no one wanted to rock the boat. Except for one person, Jake, a retired lawyer who lives 2 doors down. He'd been through his own battles with the homeowner association and knew their tricks. He offered to help me draft a stronger appeal and even suggested we take it to the local media if necessary. But before we could do anything, things escalated. One morning I woke up to find my chain cut. Not just removed, cut. The ends were frayed and the sign was gone. I was furious. I called the police again, but they said there was no evidence of who did it. I knew it was Karen, but without proof there was nothing I could do. Then the fines started pouring in. $500 for unauthorized landscaping. I'd planted some flowers. $1,000 for excessive noise. My dog barked once. $2,000 for failure to maintain community standards. My grass was half an inch too long. It was clear they were trying to bury me in fines, hoping I'd give up. But I wasn't going to let them win. I started documenting everything. Photos, videos, recordings of conversations with Karen and the homeowner association. I even set up a security camera to catch anyone messing with my property. And then I found something that changed everything. While going through the homeowner association's financial records, which Jake helped me obtain, I discovered something suspicious. Payments to a construction company for landscaping services that no one had ever seen. Kickbacks to board members. Even a secret fund labeled legal expenses that didn't match any official cases. I had proof of corruption, but before I could do anything with it, I got another letter. This one wasn't a fine. It was a notice of foreclosure. The homeowner association was claiming I owed over $10,000 in unpaid fines and was threatening to seize my house. I was out of time. I had to act fast. The foreclosure notice hit me like a punch to the gut. $10,000 in unpaid fines? They were fabricating numbers, and I had the proof. But time was running out. I had 30 days to respond, or they'd take my house. I couldn't let that happen. I called Jake immediately. He came over, his face grim as he read through the notice. "This is dirty," he said, shaking his head. "They're trying to scare you into backing down. But we've got the upper hand now. We just need to play this smart." We spent the next few days compiling evidence. The financial records, the cut chain, the absurd fines. Everything pointed to a system designed to crush dissent. But the most damning piece of evidence was a series of emails Jake helped me uncover. They were between the Homeowner Association president, Richard Grayson, and a local construction company. The emails detailed kickbacks, inflated invoices, and even a plan to remove problematic homeowners by any means necessary. One email stood out. "Alex is becoming a liability. We need to expedite the foreclosure process before they expose us. Karen has been useful, but we may need to cut ties if this gets messy." Karen, of course. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was working with the Homeowner Association. They'd been using her to target homeowners who didn't fall in line. I felt a mix of anger and vindication. I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting against a system built on lies and intimidation. Jake suggested we go public. "We need to hit them where it hurts," and he said. "The media, social media, even local government. Once people see what's really going on, they won't be able to sweep this under the rug." I agreed, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. The Homeowner Association had money, connections, and a reputation to protect. They'd fight back hard. Still, I had no other choice. The next morning, I reached out to a local journalist, Sarah Mitchell. She'd written about corruption in local government before, and she was eager to hear my story. We met at a coffee shop, and I laid everything out: the fines, the harassment, the emails. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the evidence on my laptop. "This is huge," she said. "If we can verify these emails, we can blow this wide open. But we need to move fast. Once the Homeowner Association catches wind of this, they'll try to shut it down." We spent the next week working on the story. Sarah interviewed other homeowners who'd been targeted by the Homeowner Association, and their stories were eerily similar to mine. Fines for trivial things, threats of foreclosure, constant harassment. It was a pattern of abuse, and Karen was at the center of it all. Meanwhile, the Homeowner Association was turning up the heat. I started getting anonymous calls in the middle of the night. My security camera caught someone trying to tamper with my car. And then, one evening, I came home to find my front door vandalized. The word "leave" was spray-painted in bright red letters. I called the police, but they said there was no way to prove who did it. I knew it was the Homeowner Association, or maybe Karen herself, but without evidence, there was nothing I could do. I felt like I was being watched everywhere I went. But I wasn't alone. A few neighbors started reaching out, offering support. They were tired of living in fear, tired of being bullied by the Homeowner Association. One of them, a young mother named Lisa, told me her story. She'd been fined $2,000 for having a swing set in her backyard. When she refused to pay, they threatened to take her house. She was terrified, but she was also angry. "If we don't stand up to them now," she said, "they'll keep doing this to everyone." Her words gave me hope. Maybe we could fight back together. The day Sarah's article was published, everything changed. The headline was bold: "Homeowner Association or Mafia, the Dark Side of Suburban Living." The article laid out everything: the corruption, the harassment, the threats. It even named Karen as a key player in the Homeowner Association scheme. The response was immediate. The story went viral, and suddenly everyone was talking about the Homeowner Association. News outlets picked it up, and social media exploded with outrage. People started sharing their own stories, and the hashtag #ShawnerHomeowner Association tyranny started trending. The homeowner association tried to damage control. They issued a statement calling the article baseless and defamatory, but it was too late. The evidence was too damning. Richard Grayson resigned as president, and the construction company cut ties with the homeowner association. But Karen, she doubled down. She showed up at my house the day after the article came out, her face red with rage. "How dare you?" she screamed. "You've ruined everything. You think you're so clever, but you're just a troublemaker." I stood my ground. "You brought this on yourself, Karen. You and the homeowner association thought you could bully people into silence, but you messed with the wrong person." She stormed off, but I knew this wasn't over. The homeowner association was wounded, but they weren't defeated. And Karen, she wasn't the type to go down without a fight. The fallout from Sarah's article was swift and brutal, for the homeowner association at least. Richard Grayson's resignation sent shockwaves through the community, and the construction company's decision to cut ties left the homeowner association scrambling to cover their tracks. But while the organization was in disarray, Karen was anything but defeated. If anything, she seemed more determined than ever to make me pay. It started with small things. My mailbox was vandalized again, this time with the words "snitch" scrawled across it in black paint. My security camera caught her lingering near my property late at night, though she always left before I could confront her. Then came the anonymous letters, threatening, hate-filled rants about how I'd ruined the neighborhood and deserved what was coming. I reported everything to the police, but without concrete evidence linking Karen to the incidents, there was little they could do. "We understand your frustration," one officer told me, "but unless we catch her in the act, our hands are tied." Jake urged me to stay calm. "She's trying to provoke you," he said. "Don't give her the satisfaction. We've got the upper hand now. Let the law do its job." But the law felt painfully slow. Meanwhile, the homeowner association was regrouping. They held an emergency meeting, and while they publicly condemned the actions of their former president, they also announced a new zero-tolerance policy for disruptive behavior. It was a thinly veiled threat aimed squarely at me. The fines started pouring in again. This time they were even more absurd. 1,000 for unauthorized use of a garden hose, number 4, unauthorized use of a garden hose, 500 for excessive bird feeders, and $5,000 for creating a hostile environment. It was clear they were trying to bankrupt me, to force me out before I could expose any more of their secrets. But I wasn't backing down. With Jake's help, I filed a countersuit against the homeowner association, alleging harassment, defamation, and wrongful foreclosure. It was a risky move. Legal battles are expensive and time-consuming, but I had no other choice. This wasn't just about my home anymore. It was about holding them accountable for years of abuse. The lawsuit made headlines, and the community's reaction was mixed. Some neighbors rallied behind me, organizing a petition to dissolve the homeowner association altogether. Others, however, sided with Karen and the board, accusing me of stirring up trouble and destroying the neighborhood's reputation. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Friendships were strained, and casual conversations turned into heated arguments. Lisa, the young mother who'd supported me early on, told me she'd been ostracized by some of the other parents. "They think I'm a troublemaker now," she said, her voice trembling. "But I can't just sit back and let them bully us." Her words reminded me why I was fighting. This wasn't just about me, it was about everyone who'd been silenced, everyone who'd been too afraid to speak up. We were stronger together, and I wasn't going to let Karen or the homeowner association tear us apart. Then one night, everything changed. I was working late, going through more of the homeowner association's financial records, when I heard a noise outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I saw movement on the security camera feed. Someone was in my backyard. I grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate, my heart pounding. As I stepped outside, I saw her, Karen, crouched near my shed, holding something in her hands. When she saw me, she froze, her eyes wide with panic. "What are you doing?" I demanded, shining the light in her face. She stood up, clutching a can of gasoline. "You think you're so smart," she spat, her voice shaking with rage. "But you're not going to win. I'll make sure of that." Before I could react, she threw the can at me and ran. I dodged it, but the smell of gasoline filled the air. My heart raced as I realized what she'd been planning. She was going to set my house on fire. I called the police immediately, and this time, they took me seriously. Karen was arrested that night, charged with attempted arson and trespassing. It was a small victory, but it felt like a turning point. For the first time, Karen's mask had slipped, and everyone could see the truth. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was dangerous. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Karen's arrest made national news, and the homeowner association was forced to issue another statement, this time condemning her actions. But it was too little, too late. The community was in an uproar, and calls for the homeowner association's dissolution grew louder. But even as the tide turned in my favor, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Karen was just one piece of the puzzle, and the homeowner association still had plenty of allies. They'd fight back, and I needed to be ready. Karen's arrest was a turning point, but it didn't end the war. If anything, it made the homeowner association more desperate. They knew their grip on the neighborhood was slipping, and they were willing to do whatever it took to hold on to power. The question was, how far would they go? The day after Karen's arrest, I received a letter from the homeowner association's lawyers. It was a cease and desist order demanding that I drop my lawsuit and stop spreading false information about the organization. They threatened to countersue for defamation if I didn't comply. I showed the letter to Jake, who just laughed. "They're bluffing," he said. "They know they're on shaky ground, and they're trying to intimidate you. Don't fall for it." But the homeowner association wasn't just relying on legal threats. They launched a PR campaign, painting themselves as the victims of a smear campaign and accusing me of destroying the community. They even held a town hall meeting where the new homeowner association president, a slick-talking man named Greg Thompson, gave a speech about unity and moving forward. I attended the meeting along with Jake and a few other supporters. Greg's speech was full of empty platitudes, but what really got under my skin was how he talked about Karen. He called her a dedicated volunteer who'd made a mistake and urged the community to forgive and forget. I couldn't stay silent. When the floor opened for questions, I stood up. "Forgive and forget," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Karen tried to burn down my house. She's been harassing me and others for years, and the homeowner association let her do it. How can you talk about unity when you've been enabling this kind of behavior?" The room erupted. Some people cheered, while others shouted at me to sit down. Greg tried to regain control, but the damage was done. The meeting ended in chaos, and the divide in the community grew even wider. But the homeowner association wasn't done. A few days later, I got a call from Sarah, the journalist who'd broken the original story. "You need to see this," she said, her voice tense. She sent me a link to a video that had just been posted online. It was a security camera recording from inside my house. The video showed me going through the homeowner association's financial records, muttering to myself about corruption and kickbacks. It was edited to make me look unhinged, like some kind of conspiracy theorist. The caption read, "Is this the person you want leading our community?" I felt sick. They'd hacked into my security system. They were watching me. I called Jake, and we went straight to the police. This time, they took it seriously. The homeowner association had crossed a line, and even they couldn't ignore it. A detective was assigned to the case, and within days they had a warrant to search the homeowner association's offices. What they found was shocking. Boxes of documents detailing years of corruption, kickbacks, embezzlement, even blackmail. There were records of illegal surveillance, not just of me but of other homeowners who dared to speak out. And then there were the emails, hundreds of them, between Greg Thompson and local officials, discussing how to neutralize anyone who threatened their power. It was a bombshell. Sarah published another article, and this time, the fallout was immediate. Greg resigned along with most of the homeowner association board. The construction company was investigated, and several local officials were forced to step down. The homeowner association was effectively dismantled, and a new independent committee was formed to oversee the neighborhood. It felt like a victory, but it came at a cost. The community was fractured, and the scars of the battle would take years to heal. Karen's trial was still pending, and while she faced serious charges, I knew she'd never truly admit fault. She'd always see herself as the victim. As for me, I was exhausted. The fight had taken everything I had, my time, my energy, my peace of mind. But I didn't regret it. I'd stood up to a system designed to crush dissent, and I'd won. Not just for myself, but for everyone who'd been silenced. The dismantling of the homeowner association was a victory, but it didn't feel like one. Not at first. The neighborhood was in shambles. Friendships had been broken, trust had been shattered, and the sense of community we'd once had was gone. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of the battle. Boarded up windows, for sale signs, and neighbors who avoided eye contact. Karen's trial was the final nail in the coffin. She pleaded not guilty, claiming she'd been framed and manipulated by the homeowner association. Her lawyers painted her as a victim, a well-meaning volunteer who'd been caught up in something bigger than herself. But the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage, the gasoline can, the threatening letters, it all pointed to one conclusion. Karen was guilty. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and when the verdict came in, it was unanimous. Karen was convicted of attempted arson, trespassing, and harassment. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, though her lawyers immediately filed an appeal. It was a small measure of justice, but it didn't bring back the sense of safety we'd lost. In the months that followed, the neighborhood began to rebuild. The new committee, made up of volunteers from the community, worked tirelessly to restore trust and transparency. They held regular meetings, posted minutes online, and encouraged open dialogue. It wasn't perfect. Old wounds don't heal overnight, but it was a start. I tried to move on too. I repaired the damage to my house, planted new flowers in the garden, and even joined the committee as a member at large. It felt strange, sitting in the same room where the homeowner association had once held court, but it was also cathartic. This was our chance to do things differently, to create a community where everyone had a voice. But not everyone was ready to forgive. Some neighbors still blamed me for rocking the boat, while others saw me as a hero. It was an uncomfortable position to be in, and I often found myself caught in the middle of heated arguments. Lisa, the young mother who'd supported me from the beginning, became one of my closest allies. Together, we worked to bridge the divide, organizing block parties and community cleanups to bring people together. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, petty arguments, lingering resentment, and the occasional anonymous complaint. But slowly, things began to change. People started talking to each other again, sharing stories and finding common ground. The neighborhood wasn't the same as it had been before, but maybe that was a good thing. Maybe we needed to break before we could rebuild. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, Jake stopped by. He'd been a constant source of support throughout the ordeal, and I owed him more than I could ever repay. "You did it," he said, handing me a cup of coffee. "You took on the system and won. Not many people can say that." I smiled, but it was bittersweet. "It doesn't feel like winning," I admitted, "not when so many people got hurt." "Change is never easy," he said, "but it's necessary. You showed people that they don't have to live in fear, that they can stand up for what's right. That's something to be proud of." His words stayed with me long after he left. Maybe he was right. Maybe the fight had been worth it. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd been silenced. We'd taken back our neighborhood, and in doing so, we'd taken back our power. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We were stronger together, and as long as we kept fighting for what was right, we could build something better.